6:32 p.m. And I will call the roll. Alderman Williamson.
Here.
Alderman Ludvigson.
Here.
Alderman Rosenthal.
Here.
Alderman Messer.
Here.
Alderman Dolick.
Here.
And we have participating remotely due to injury. He has told us in advance that he called the clerk and has scheduled himself to be teleconferenced. Mayor Helmer is here. Mayor, I have you on the line.
Here.
Okay, and other officials present? If you want to start down.
Michael Ducharme, Finance Director.
Peter Falcone, Assistant City Administrator.
Dan Peterson, Director of Building and Development.
Joe Wade, City Administrator.
Kevin Carney, City Attorney.
Karen Schulteis, Deputy Clerk.
Jim Zalaki, Deputy Chief.
And our Treasurer? Rich Smith, City Treasurer. Okay. And our City Clerk is out today also. Previously told us she is ill. And now we would like to ask for a motion.
Were you here in the roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
Ask for a motion for a mayor pro tem.
I move in the absence of the mayor that we nominate Alderman Williamson as chairman pro tem.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. 5.
Good evening. I'd like to ask that everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Alderman Messer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to invite up Miss Betty Cloud to do the invocation. How are you, Betty?
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, I ask that you please bow your head in prayer. God of all creation, we thank you for this day and the many blessings you have received. We thank you for the people from whom we have been in contact, our family, our friends, and strangers. We thank you for the ability to use our minds to discern your will and to work to a strong and a healthy community. We thank you for our community and for all we serve, for those who teach and for those who protect, for those who clean and for those who repair, for those who work in parks and for those who work on roads, for those who plan and for those who make those plans happen, for those who heal and for those who counsel, for anyone suffering from the recent hurricanes, please heal their souls. For those who are governed and for those who elect, for anyone celebrating Yom Kippur and their holiest high days, please grant them peace and grant them love. For all who live in the best example of what it means to be a citizen, we thank you for our community. We pray for all in our community who are hungry, unemployed, or uninsured. We pray for our community who are mentally or physically ill. We pray for everyone in our community who live in violence. For those and all the burdens of our larger community, Lord, please hear our prayer. As this meeting begins this evening, I pray for each person here. Give each person clarity of mind, creativity, compassion, due diligence, integrity, and a sense of humor. Give them listening ears and thoughtful words. Give them presence of mind and an open house. And all people that God loves. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to number 5, approval of minutes. Item A, the September 11th, 2017 regular workshop meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'd like to call for a voice vote. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 5B, the August 28th, 2017 executive session minutes, but not for public release. I'd like to get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. A voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. I turn it over to you, Joe.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Our first item for under presentations is Rob Roy donation presentation to the Prospect Heights Police Department and Prospect Heights Fire Protection District. And we have a representative from Rob Roy. Please come up.
Mr. Mayor, Acting Mayor, and distinguished members of the council, thank you for the opportunity for presenting and honoring our first responders, both the fire department and the police department. As president of Rob Roy, I have many tasks, but the one that's the most rewarding for me by far is the acknowledgement of the contribution that these two organizations provide toward our quality of life. Therefore, on behalf of the residents of Rob Roy, and as a token of our appreciation, I'd like to present checks to both the chief of the fire department and the representative of the police department.
Thank you very much. Thank you on behalf of the Fire District. We gratefully accept.
We're fortunate to have such distinguished gentlemen and the organization they represent serving us. And I think this is just a token of our appreciation of Rob Roy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's from one of the city's great neighborhoods. Next up is item 6B, presentation of Lake Claire drainage study by John Briggs of Gawalt Hamilton Engineering. This is a follow-up to earlier council review of the matter, I think maybe last spring, and the direction was to undertake an engineering study to analyze the issue. And tonight, John Briggs is going to present the report, and if the council has any questions, there will be no action taken tonight, but just a presentation of the report.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is John Briggs. I'm Gawalt Hamilton. We were asked to look into a drainage study for an issue related to the Lake Claire neighborhood area with some repeated flooding that has been reported in the area. So what we were asked to do is kind of take a look at the existing system, determine if there was any potential problems, any potential solutions, and what next steps we might need to look at to go further. So we took a look at it originally by studying the existing capacity of the system. We went out and we did a survey of the existing system for the storm sewer, which shot the elevations of the storm inverts, got pipe sizes so we could determine the capacity of the system itself. The existing system is, if you look up on the sewer system map right there, you kind of see highlighted areas. The lake itself has a direct tributary drainage area of about 14.2 acres going to it. However, the restrictor, you can see, is labeled a little bit further down, bottom middle of the page, significantly far from the lake. Because of that, there's approximately 40.2 acres, I believe, is what is, yes, 40.7 acres is what is actually tributary to the restrictor of the Lake Claire storm sewer. So while it's not a lot going to it directly, a lot of it backs up. So when you have a rainfall event, the storm sewer system collects all the water. It can't get through the restrictor, so the water backs up. So what we did is we kind of analyzed the existing storm sewer system, which is comprised of 24-inch storm sewer pipes down to the restrictor, and then it increases to 30-inch as it continues further down towards the Shires Pond area. So we looked at it originally as it is now with the restrictor in it. We obtained information from the MWRD for the permit design and kind of ran through a hydraulic model of that system. What we found is that the system does indeed back up into the lake, and the elevation that we came up with for the high water line is higher than what was the original design elevation by about a little over 2 feet. This also elevation is higher than what is the known elevations of residents at 501 Shawn Lane who has experienced flooding in the past. So based on the existing system, if you look at Table 1, and I think everyone was given a copy of the report, I don't know if you have it in front of you or not, but in Table 1 we have a comparison of it. The 1978 design permit information, the existing conditions information shows a residential flooding depth in that lot of about 1.3 feet. So we also then looked at, well, what if we took the restrictor out altogether and just had free outfall? Because I know that was a discussion that we wanted to take a look at. So we did that. We ran it as if there was no restrictor pipe in it at all. The elevations do go down, but it still does show that it is higher by about 1.5 feet than what the designed elevation was. So based on that, the existing system itself, even without a restrictor, does not appear to be large enough to convey the flow out of the pond. So once we completed with that, we did take a look at also some other things. When you don't have the restrictor in there, it's not just a matter of the water can just go. Even if it had capacity, we have to look further downstream. And another question that came up and was requested actually was the interconnection with the Shires Pond to help pick up some of this detention and kind of maybe balance the system out. And while physically it may be possible, it's not as straightforward as just taking out the restrictor here and dumping it into another detention basin, because those basins are designed to kind of act independently of each other. And if you start putting flows in that don't belong there, it can have unintended effects further downstream. It could actually cause flooding for other residents that never had any issues before, and could actually cause more problems than it would be solved. So while we did consider there may be a possibility to do something with that, it would require probably quite a bit more study before you could determine if it was even viable for that. One of the other things we also wanted to look at was, I guess, the St. Alphonse Church to the north. It's not shown on that map, but it's just to the north of there. And they have done some improvements over the years that were also permitted through the MWRD. We did a document request from them, and we were able to get permit information from their 2001 and 2003 projects. And in the 2001 project is when they constructed the basin on the southwest corner of the property, which does have a connection to the Lake Claire area through an overflow storm sewer if the pond were to overtop. Now in 2003, they did an expansion of that, and they built another pond on the southeast portion of the property, and then they also, as part of this work, rerouted the outfall from their pond to the north. So the water now goes to the north out towards McDonald Creek. So based on that, the storm sewer flow does not come to the south unless, again, the ponds overtop their 100-year design elevation, in which case there is still an overflow spillway that connects that to the ditch to the north that would run towards Lake Claire. But that would have to overtop the existing berm first before it would do that. So there is an opportunity to possibly move that pipe with their new storm sewer design going to the north. We could possibly change that overflow pipe to the north as well. But again, that'd have to be looked at to see if there's any capacity there. But it does not look like the church is causing any direct impacts to the Lake Claire drainage system. If we were to improve this system, we originally wanted to look at this as if we could just take the restrictor, build a new one with an overflow weir elevation in it, because normally you have the restrictor size, and then at a certain elevation of your high water line, you have the storm sewer allowed to kind of free fall over the top in case you exceed its capacity. So we originally looked at taking the restrictor, moving it closer to the pond, and constructing something of that nature. We found we could probably make it work elevation-wise, but that's where we started looking at the storm sewer capacity downstream, where it would have to be able to convey that flow. In order to convey the flow of that, we would have to replace a long segment of that, essentially almost down to the Shires Pond, which is about 2,200 feet long. So if we wanted to do that, large diameter storm sewers, you know, they're probably about 36-inch diameter minimum. To do that, we'd be in rear yards, so it would be a lot of access easement issues and stuff like that. But it would be very expensive to replace something. So we thought we could maybe do something with the restrictor that wouldn't be too expensive, but it turned out that in order for that to work, additional, much more expensive improvements would have to be done. So looking at that, basically the options that we kind of have is, it looks like, you know, the system probably was operating like this from day one. As far as we can tell, there's not new storm sewer that's been changed or been added. You know, the church doesn't seem to be adding anything of significance to it. So we could go through and do additional studies on the storm sewer system, possibly increase its capacity, possibly interconnect the Shires ponds. Obviously, all that would be in need of additional work and probably significant cost. You also have the option of removing the house and increasing the pond size of Lake Claire itself. That is also an option. So we kind of just gave it a general look to see what it was, but again, it looks like the system itself it does not work in the manner it was really intended to. And in order to improve it, it'd probably be significant, you know, more effort involved, I think, to kind of make it function properly. That put anybody to sleep? Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Larry.
So summarize again, what are the choices if the council were to act on this, what are the choices?
Choices are you can do nothing,
Right.
because it could be from day one condition. You could buy the house, tear it down, expand the detention basin, or not expand the detention basin, possibly permit a different house at a higher elevation. You could study further system improvements and possibly have to replace existing storm sewer infrastructure with larger diameter pipes. You could interconnect the two basins to try to utilize that capacity, but again, that would have to be studied further to determine its, you know, viability.
What would be the financial impact of those choices? You know, I know you don't have it down to the dollar or $1,000.
Yeah.
But you could say,
Just looking, and I put in the report too, just looking at replacing the storm sewer between Lake Claire and the Shires ponds would probably be $750,000 based on the size and the additional drainage study work and engineering that would have to be done on something like that. If you were to interconnect to the Shires ponds, that cost I honestly don't know, because you would have to look at what you'd have to do to the basin. Can you increase its size? Would you have to increase storm sewers further downstream? You know, so that could, you know,
Right.
kind of compound it even further. And then
the
the
other
house.
thing is buy the house?
Buy the house, which depends on what the assessed value is, and then whatever you'd want to do with it after that.
I had a few questions.
Yes, sir.
I noticed the contour lines on the drawing that you had. Some of the lots nearby have contour lines that are below what I think the flood level is, yet those areas don't seem to get water. Can you explain that? Like just to the west and a little bit to the north, they have, I think it was 642 contour lines, which is below the level of what seemed like what would be the flood. Why does that area flood and not?
Well, based on the map, you can see we got the bright orange lines. That is kind of a ridge line elevation for the system. So as the ground goes up and down, it drains different directions. So it's very possible further to the north, it is significantly lower. It just doesn't drain towards Lake Claire to begin with, because it has to go uphill first and then it comes back downhill. And so it's at a completely different drainage area that it goes to.
And you had made mention that St. Al's designed their system to the 100-year flood, which is a standard.
That is the standard, yes.
How many times in the past 20 years have we had a 100-year flood level?
Around here, I don't know, because it's a 1% chance. So you really can have a 100-year flood event 2 days in a row.
I mean, in this area, we've had 100-year floods throughout the suburbs, right? I mean,
You
the
can,
past 20
yeah,
years.
it can, yeah.
So, I mean, a 100-year flood is not 20 inches of rain, it's
No,
7 or 8 inches.
it's a difference between the intensity of the rainfall over the duration of the event. So you can have a really short event of, say, 2 hours where 8 inches of rain falls, or you can have an event where it rains for 2 days and you get 10 inches or 15 inches of rain, and that'll give you a different runoff value for the different.
But when you design
basins.
to a 100-year flood and you're doing it in a subdivision, is there a factor that says that if you have a 100-year flood, now you're just encroaching on usable land that they have versus flooding a structure? I mean, what thought goes into how you grade out a subdivision for a 100-year flood? What does that mean from your standpoint of what the contour lines would look like?
Sure. When you're doing the subdivision design itself, when you create that, you're supposed to not release the water any faster than what it was released before development. Now, the volume increases, but the rate of release does not change. So if it ran off at, say, 1 cubic foot per second, and it's a farm field, and you build a bunch of houses on it, it still has to run off at 1 cubic foot per second. So that cannot change, and that is just the general subdivision.
It's for that subdivision itself?
For
not
that one
individual.
subdivision, yes. And then wherever it did discharge naturally before is where it can discharge again naturally, so you're not increasing the amount of flow downstream neighbors, so you're not impacting them with your development.
And if you had the ability to buy a house or buy a property that floods because of a drainage issue, what percent of projects would you look at to say that if we could just eliminate 2 or 3 areas within this area or 1 area within this area that floods, you wouldn't have to do the drainage work itself? Is that a high percentage if you just eliminate the actual area that's flooding from trying to remediate it?
In the work that I've done, it's not. I have been in projects where we have taken down houses, and that was an area actually they just actually tore them down last year after about 7 years of working on getting them done. But it was probably 7 or 8 houses in a kind of a bowl area. It was no basin. It was just a low-lying, repeat flood area. But it was considered a neighborhood-wide improvement, and the cost of doing that actually was about the same as the storm sewer improvement design that we had come up with. But in the long term, it was determined that was just a better solution. So, but normally, it's not the common route to take down the residents.
It's not a common route, but it's always a solution.
It's always a solution, but yeah, it's not the one that we normally look at.
And the last question was there anything in the paperwork you looked at on the lake itself? I've always heard it been here for a long time. I remember when that was cornfields. The reason why that lake is there is when they dug the foundation for the first houses that were going in, it was spring fed, and they hit water pretty quick and picked that area. They had to change their plans and pick that area to be the detention or retention, whatever it's called. Is that factored into this? I mean, if you have an area that's feeding water into this area that's being used as your detention, I mean, you're never going to get that thing low enough to.
No, and we didn't actually encounter that in our data that we found, but that does happen, and I've had that happen on other projects where you're building a detention basin and you find a spring, and you were planning on, say, maybe a dry bottom basin, and now it's going to become a pond. The detention elevation doesn't really change because of that, so it just becomes the water elevation becomes your normal water line or your bottom of your pond as opposed to the ground. So the detention is always at that elevation above it, so you would set your outfall of your pipe at that elevation, so the spring would just be constantly going into the storm sewer system, essentially. But it wouldn't affect the detention volume itself.
Okay.
It has a nominal effect, but nothing that you can really quantify.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No.
Alderman Dolick, any questions?
No, thank you.
Alderman Messer?
No.
All right, I have no questions at this time. If anybody does come up with any questions, please feel free to reach out to John and ask those questions. And, we'll put this under further review for right now. We just saw this for the first time on Thursday, so we'll talk about it again soon.
The next item is presentation of pavement assessment report, also by John. And this follows from council direction from last fall or winter to undertake a pavement assessment evaluation, and with the end goal being that that's something that would provide a rational basis for us to make decisions as far as capital improvement planning, when to program street resurfacing projects, how to prioritize them, It's extensive work. They've reviewed every street in the city, and at that, I'll turn it over to John for his findings.
Okay, thank you. All right, on the pavement assessment report, we did take a look at all the different streets, and we put together a pavement condition rating system for them. It's based on a visual assessment of the pavements using various criteria, such as, cracking, rutting, pavement failures, drainage. And there's probably 8 or 10 different items in here that we take a look at, and they are summarized in the report itself. So we did take a look at everything in there. We kind of ranked everything based on the status of the system as it is, today. So some streets obviously have just been repaved, other streets haven't been touched in many years, and that usually shows up well in the assessments that we do. We based it on a 15-year period of return, and then we prioritized it based on the severity of the distress only. We did not look at neighborhood groupings or anything like that. We just went through and assessed the pavements themselves. We also put together this in a 2017 construction cost summary, so all the streets are in 2017 funds, and then further in the report they are broken down with escalators in them for future work. So we did organize them in the order of the worst to first, essentially, regardless of where they fell into the system, just based on their conditions. So there's several different ways that can be moving forward, you can address these, and the different color codings on the map are just based on the different program year that is intended for them to be repaired. But we go through and you can either do, essentially, it's more of a patch and overlay type program, which is on the streets that are in really good shape still or have minimal damage. You just basically patch out the bad areas, you put a leveling course over it, and you can put a new wear surface on the top. You also have more of a full depth reclamation, which can either be just kind of a minimal excavation or milling, or a pulverization of the existing asphalt that's there, turn it into new aggregate base and an overlay on top of that. Then there's also full reconstruction of pavements, which are only necessary when the roadway is fully deteriorated. You do have one roadway system that does fall under the reconstruction. You have one, I think that was, or one or two that fell under the full depth reclamation, and then the rest are basically patch and overlay type programs. To go through those, we used a cost for the patch and overlays of about $28 a square yard, based on bids that we've been getting recently, kind of working that in with the number going forward. So that's kind of a cost average. It does not take into account curbs or drainage. It's purely looking at the road condition itself, because most of the streets in town are ditch sections. The drainage itself is not affecting the road as much as if it was all curb and gutter, and you'd have to look at that. So we'd have to look at the drainage if you wanted to move forward on various year programs. So in the report, we kind of did take a look at all the streets, and again, there's a summary of it in there by roadway name that gives you the rough square yardages, the PRC value, and then when it's scheduled. Then we also broke it up by the PRC itself, which indicates it's worst to first. And the worst ones you have right now are the Seminole Lane areas, and then they increase actually fairly quickly. You do have pretty nice streets in town. And then we broke it down into the 15-year program. So we used the $2017 for construction only, and we broke them all up into even approximate dollar amounts. If you look at the report later, you'll see some streets that are ranked maybe one or two different, might fall into a different year, like an 81 might fall a year later than an 82. That's purely just so the numbers of construction were about the same, but they can be moved around. So working through that, in the $2017 construction only in a 15-year program, it works out to about 1.15 to 1.2 million per year in 2017 dollars for all those streets. That's just for construction. And then if you look at further in the report, we break down the streets when you start getting into the individual sheets when you look at them later. We do apply a 4% inflationary escalator per year, and then we add in a 10% contingency and a 10% construction and design engineering for budgetary purposes. So as you go through, obviously with the escalators, you start with your first year at about the 1.15, and then when you get to year 2032, that 1.15 comes in at about 2.5. So, obviously the longer things go, and you hope inflation's not gonna be 4%, but that's usually a pretty conservative inflation number for us. So again, we kind of went through that and came up with a list for you for the budgetary purposes and just further discussion, I guess. Obviously, if you decide you wanted to do a longer program, that can be addressed as well, or however you would want to move forward with it. So I guess I'll ask any questions on that.
Does anyone have any questions? No questions, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Well,
John.
Thank you very much.
Moving ahead.
Which brings us to item 7, appointments, confirmations, and proclamations. And Mayor Helmer does have an item on the agenda tonight. It's consideration of the appointment of Bruce Mellon to the Plan Commission Zoning Board of Appeals. His application is in the packet. It's felt that he has a background that would be very useful to the Plan Commission. Civil engineer, is a profession. He works in development issues, physical development. And at that, Mayor Helmer is asking the council to consider this appointment.
Can we call Bruce Mellon up to the podium? If anybody has any questions for him? Bruce, would you mind stating your name and your address for?
Hi, good evening. I'm Bruce Mellon. I live at 1111 Drury Lane. I actually have an Arlington Heights address, but I am a Prospect Heights resident, so.
We did find it.
And I'd be happy to take any questions anybody might have about my background.
Alderman Ludwigson?
No, I think it's a good choice.
Alderman Dolig?
No, I've examined the resume and it's very impressive. Just to confirm, you are a resident of Prospect Heights. That was my only question coming into this.
Absolutely. I pay my sewer bill every 3 months.
That's all I have.
We found him. He's at last house in Prospect Heights. Alderman Rosenthal?
No question.
Alderman Messer?
Nope, I was impressed with what I read, so.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Thank you for stepping forward and doing it. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint Bruce Mellon to the Planning Commission Zoning Board of Appeals.
So moved. Second.
Okay, can we get a roll call, please?
Alderman Rosenthal,
Aye.
Alderman Dolig,
Aye.
Alderman Messer,
Aye.
Alderman Ludwigson,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Williamson.
Aye. All right, motion approves 5-0. Thanks again, Bruce.
Congratulations.
And welcome. Next item is 8, citizen concerns and comments. Do we have anything listed for agenda?
Nothing was given to me.
Very good. Which brings us to item 9, staff elected officials and commission reports. And we start off with item 9A, Chicago Executive Airport Monthly Update by Director Betty Cloud.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Just a short report this evening. We wanted to let you know that we've begun 865 Design Company. They are the same design company that was used at the Wheeling Village Hall. And what we're in the process of doing, as most of you have heard us mention in the past, we are in need of doing a new customs building. So our decision was, do we just do a customs building? Do we also do an SRE, which is called a snow removal equipment building? As we're putting more and more money into our snow removal, it can't sit outside during the summertime. Or do we now start looking at the administrative building because it's sitting right in the middle currently of where we would like to do some, hopefully, renovations in the future. So this 865 Design Company have met with all the directors. They are now meeting with staff. They have met with customs because they have very, very specific rules and regulations on size and things like that. So we did have a workshop last Wednesday night. As months go on, we will be continuing giving you a report on an update. It was a very reasonable amount of money that this company is charging for the entire thing, so we were very comfortable with them. These women are very, very eager to put all of our ideas together. So as time does go on, we'll be glad to give you updates. As you've heard in the news, President Trump is wanting to prioritize ATC. We did discuss that the other night. We as directors have made the decision that we are not coming forward to make a decision. It could only hurt us in the long run. We've never taken a political stand in the past, and we've decided we are not going to do so at this time. If need be, we'll face that at the time. But you can't go against your state officials when you're wanting your state officials to be on your side for financing and things like that. So we've discussed it. It's part of our minutes. It will be reflected accordingly. But again, we've decided to make no public decision as of right now. As many of you may have read or heard, that there was a drone accident last Thursday at Staten Island. It hit a Black Hawk helicopter. We, as directors, have been very pleased with the aggressive and also just the proactive, just the communication with all the citizens that we have decided to take on the drone. So hopefully we're going to be way ahead of it and we'll never have that situation here. The master plan is moving forward. The FAA and IDOT Aeronautics are still reviewing the considerations that CMT have put forward. Also, there's a company called Jepson. They're very, if anybody is involved with aviation at all, they're very interested in doing a lot of the flight procedures. They do a lot of the manuals for all of the different airports. They're looking into possibilities of what our airport can do in relation to O'Hare. I mean, it's just something that we all have to, so it's taking an awfully long time within our own minds, but it's government, as you know. The other thing I would just like to briefly mention to you is the IGA. We've had the opportunity of speaking to 4 or 5 of the aldermen. It is the understanding of the directors that in 2013, we as directors were given the authorization to be able to hire, fire, and to discipline the executive director. We do understand, and thank you, Laura, for coming forward today, that there's been a lot of misunderstanding that has come through to the aldermen. Joe, what we're going to do is that we will be in contact with our counsel, Tom Lester, very, very soon. You will be given a copy of the 2013 version of the IGA. The only thing that we as directors are looking to do is to shorten the time frame. Right now it's up for 3 years of review. If there is a problem, we would like to take care of it right away. And if any of you have ever worked in the corporate world where you may have had 5 or 6 different bosses that you have to relate to or you have to answer to, nothing is ever accomplished. Between the Village of Whaling, between the City of Prospect Heights, between the Board of Directors at Chicago Executive Airport, there are many, many different masters, obviously. We as directors are on a constant basis, 4 to 5 days, every single week with that office. So if there is ever anything major that would come forward, one of the representatives for Prospect Heights will come to one of your workshops and go into executive session. That much you definitely have our word on. But Joe, we will be turning something officially over to you from our lawyer that you can pass on to the alderman and hopefully clear this up once and for all, because our understanding is that we've already had this authorization since 2013. So we want to just clear that part of it up right away. Any questions that you may have for me as the airport representative?
But if we've had this since 2013, we've had agreements since then.
No, sir.
Why was it in this present agreement then, the current agreement?
The last change that we did was 2013 to the IGA.
There weren't any changes since then?
No, sir.
Okay. That answers my question.
And this major change that was not mentioned in the letter of May the 30th from our attorney, we're not quite sure why the wording was not what we felt should have been a little bit more of an exploratory and with a greater explanation. But this will be definitely cleared up before your next workshop, because we would like to get this taken care of, as the Village of Wheeling have already approved it as of the 7th of August. So it's kind of like sort of in limbo right now.
Alderman Ludwigson?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman
Just
Miller?
one quick question.
Sure.
My company got a drone for to use for something more far away from here, so we have nothing to do with Milwaukee. But I went onto the website to look it up. You used to have that brochure that you could look up and see right on the front page of the website, because I wanted to see what the rules were. And it's there if you type in drone and look for it. But do you understand all those rules about it? Is it 5 miles from the airport that you cannot use one?
That is our understanding, and it has to remain under 400 feet.
So within 5 miles of an airport, you can't even go up 1 foot. So
That's correct.
pretty much all of Prospect Heights is covered by that. So there's really no rules to look up. You just need to know you can't use them.
It's amazing though how many phone calls that are being turned into Rob Marks of people that are wanting to buy and looking for information, which is really good. I think one of the little problems is that the FAA has never come out with steadfast rules, but now that one of the Black Hawk helicopters was badly damaged, fortunately nobody was injured and they were able to land successfully at Staten Island, they may now take a little bit of a different look and become a little bit more proactive, as we've been trying to do. But do you feel, Pat, that it's still easily accessible on our website? Because right now it's under construction.
When I always thought of the rules, I thought that, well, there were rules to follow, but when you're in Wheeling or in Prospect Heights, you really cannot use a drone. And there's no, maybe the west part past Rand Road of Prospect Heights you can, back where you guys live. You might just be outside that area, but it's a big area that there's no.
5 miles is quite a bit.
Yeah.
I would say 5 miles as the crow flies. You can't use it anywhere and within our city limits.
Thank you.
Alderman Dolick?
Just in general, what is the time frame that you're looking at as far as new facilities like customs and corporate offices? I know you have a company looking at the possibilities. Right. What's the time frame of their examination of this and then proceeding forward? Because I know customs, for instance, has been an ongoing issue for a long time. Is this 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, heavens no, they will not wait that long by any means. And we will be all at the NBAA convention in Las Vegas this year. It's October 10th through the 12th. And we have intentions of going around talking to some of the other GAs that are up against the same situation. So what we were talking about the other evening at our workshop is that we really have 3 different buildings that we are discussing. The very first one that has top priority with no doubt about it will be customs. And that one may, if we like the drawings, if we like the location, if we feel, and this is a very important thing for all of us, that with our master plan, if we decide to put the custom facility here, we have to make sure that CMT is really, really confident that no matter what direction that we go with our landlocked airport, basically is what we are, that building will not be touched. And if it is, it would be within the realm of taking it down and maybe putting it somewhere else. But the customs facility, hopefully, will be approved for their drawings in, I would even say, would you say as early as spring? This company, this 865, they're putting that part of it on their top priority list of the 3.
Thank you.
Alderman Rosenthal?
No question.
Alderman Messer?
Now, I just a quick comment on the IGA. So I found the report that was initially sent to us, and it is a red line of the 2013 agreement. So I don't know if there was an error when he was doing the red line, but it does show that you did not have the authority and you were requesting to have it removed so that you would.
We'll definitely clarify that. That will be, in fact, the phone call will be made tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Okay. And that leads me to my question as well. I mean, if you already have the authority to discipline the executive director, what would you need our approval for to begin with?
I think with the basic thing, Scott, that we were looking for was to slimline it, to take out some of the rhetoric of not 3 years of a review, that this would be a constant ongoing, because right now we're doing 6-month reviews of the executive director.
Sure.
If we feel that there's something that's urgent or something that is major taking place, we feel that it would be a tremendous waste of time for us to first go to the village and then come back to us, and then to come to you, and then to come back to us. Because if you remember back with Dennis Rouleau, that is exactly what happened.
I do. I understand, what you want to do. What I don't understand is if you already have the power to do it, why do you need approval from us? I mean, why are we redlining anything? In the 2013, you're saying that you already have this power.
Correct.
So what would you need our approval for?
My understanding from the director, and if you'd like to join in on this, Director Kearns.
Please, Bill.
There's a reversionary clause that says within 60 days of the anniversary, every 3 years of the IGA signing, that either municipality can request to draw back that authority. And so the whole purpose of the red line, the change proposed, was simply to take out some kind of cumbersome language that would allow either the village or the city to pull back that authority every 3 years, and just leave it as the board has the authority. If either the village or the city decide they want to take that back, then you just put together a new IGA, or you get rid of the directors. You know, I mean, there are other ways of addressing it other than this kind of cumbersome language, which I'm sorry that you weren't able to see, that addresses 60-day notice to revert back to the village or the city, you know, having that authority.
Okay. I feel it's, to go any further with this conversation, I feel that it's necessary to have the mayor involved so that he can have his voice, you know, heard.
Right. And you should have
Is he still
the
here?
actual correct copy in front of you, too.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry, Mayor, do you have any questions?
Well, there are a lot of questions, but right now I think you're right. This is time to move on, and let's spend a little time on the whole issue one more time. If we could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. All right, and you don't mind giving us a little extra time to discuss it?
Joe, when is your next workshop that this would come up so that we can we'll have an idea of when we need to have all the information to you?
Second Monday of October.
October 9th?
Yeah. October 9th.
Okay,
Betty, I'll be in touch with you tomorrow.
that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to, where are we at, 9B?
9B, Police Fire Commission report by Commissioner Joe Fiorito. This is the annual report of their activities and goals.
How you doing, Joe?
Good. Good evening. Thank you, City Council and attendees. I'm been on the Police and Fire Commission now for a number of years, and I'm one of 3 members, myself, Jerry Meyer, and Sharon Hoffman. And Jerry asked me to step in today because he couldn't present the annual report. And it's been a while since, actually it was April of 2017 since, 2016 since we actually made an annual filing. And the report will be submitted, if you guys want a copy of it, with Karen. And I'm going to just go through it quickly here, but I want to take a little bit out of order here because I always get asked this question by friends and family, like, what do you do on the police commission? Like, it's such a mysterious role, and I have no law enforcement background, so people always inquire about this. And our most important role is creating and maintaining an eligibility list for new candidates to be hired as police officers. And having been in this role for a while now, it has been a very, very active role for us. We've gone through a number of lists, and we have a lot of candidates been hired. And as you see the monthly reports that come out, you see some of these names. These are some of the names that we've hired in the most recent list, and I'm really excited to see the contributions that they're making. And it's, I'll go through a little bit about the report here, but in the past year, we've already brought on 4 new officers: Corey Simpson, Keith O'Connor, Jocelyn Garza, and Mitchell Weber. And in doing so, we exhausted the current recruit eligibility list, and we decided to take immediate action to go ahead and start the process for another list. And if you have any idea what this is like, when we start to do the testing, we do the written testing, they have to do the physicals offline, and then we create a list, and then we start the interviews. And these interviews take days. I mean, we'll give it 3-4 days of 20, 30, 40 candidates, bringing them in here one at a time. And we're kind of tough, but we think we raise the bar pretty high, and we like what we get as results. So in addition to the 4 we brought on here, we had an immediate opening here. We were able to bring back Pardeep Aldu. So that was a welcome addition to get him back into Prospect Heights. And we also looked at setting the rules. So we looked, Chief Al Stephan went back and looked at what the state of Illinois rules were versus what our rules were. And we made some changes there to help streamline the process, so we're much more in alignment with other communities. And so right now we have 29 sworn officers, 24 are full-time, 5 are part-time. Chief Al Stephan remains at the helm, and James Alaki is the deputy chief. And Stephanie Conboy acts as the assistant to the chief as well as the community liaison officer. There are 5 sergeants, and there are as well 3 corporals. Currently working with different agency services, we've got some of the guys that we've hired. Officer Mark Profont, he's with NIPAS Entry Team. Officer Christopher Skeet, he's with NIPAS Mobile Field Office. Officer Mike Smith, he's with MCAT Accident Reconstruction Team. Officer Kevin Lang was the MCAT Forensic Team. Officer Milo Derman is now serving with the DEA, and Officer Alan Thiebold, along with our stellar Bain, some of our K-9 unit. So Margie Bolger still remains as our record supervisor and oversees a staff of 2 full-time and 5 part-time personnel positions, but I think we just lost one this week. I just saw the resignation. That's a shame.
It was a good thing for him.
Yeah, it was a very good thing for him. So he's moving onward and upward into his police career. The civilian staff also consists of 2 grant-related victim advocate social worker positions, which provide 24-hour crisis service intervention and act as court liaisons along with assessing and providing the various needs of crime victims. The department continues to operate their youth outreach program with the volunteers from the ranks of officers who interact with the disadvantaged children from socioeconomically challenged areas of the city in an effort to reduce the fear of police and promote goodwill. Actually, I prefer to say promote goodwill and reduce the fear of the police. So I think we got a really unique situation here in terms of the community outreach programs. Stephanie has reported out each of our staff meetings, and it's been pretty impressive to see the sheer numbers of participation these kids get into. And as a result, you start seeing the interaction with the officers. It's a good exchange. I've only been here since 1990, and honestly, this is like one of the proudest times to be in the city. It's such a good time to live here right now. And really just want to say thank you on behalf of the rest of the commissioners, and we want to submit this report to the official docket. And if you have any questions, otherwise, let you guys get about your business.
Thanks, Joe. You know what? We want to thank you because you guys have done a great job, and the police department is a gem. So we cherish it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. They're champs.
Brings us to other elected officials and also staff reports, beginning with you, Alderman Williamson.
I have no report. Alderman Ludwigson?
No report.
Alderman Dolick?
No report.
Alderman Rosenthal?
I have a little report. As you may have seen in the notes provided by the administrator, the Strategic Directions Committee met last Tuesday. And we had 2 items on our agenda that we're dealing with. One, some initial presentations by the city plan developer was presented to the committee, and we've held that over. We haven't done anything on it yet, but we will be moving with that at our next committee meeting. The second item involved development of the city's budget, and here are some of the things we discussed. There'll be a formal request for approval of this by the council at the next meeting. Am I right on that, Joe?
Correct.
Okay. Among this was a formal adoption of a developmental process for the 2018-2019 budget, which will include a 6-month status report at the November workshop meeting. There will be a defined qualifying amount as to what will constitute in the future capital expenditure and placement in the capital budget, and the number we're working with is $25,000. There will also, as part of these recommendations, be a limitation on budget amendments. The council may recall that in prior situations, we had almost like every other month, I think it was, having amendments to the budget or having a series of amendments that through the year that really obliterated, in my opinion, where we started off and where we ended. I think the sole objective there was to eliminate variances. My years of doing budgets and preparation of budgets and operating budgets is variances are not bad in and of themselves, as long as you can explain why they are. So this hopefully will give us a better picture as we go forward into the year on our operating budget. We've discussed this over a few meetings, and as we get into the budgeting process coming up later in the year, we wanted to get this in place. Also, what we will be doing is having more focused budget meetings. As the council recalls, we have this, the Saturday day of misery in which we tried to do the entire budget at once. Needless to say, fatigue of various levels set in when we're doing this, and we're now going to make this in a series of meetings focused on like departments and working it that way so that the fatigue factor doesn't set in. We're also going to have more input from the department directors to the city administrator as we move forward with prioritization, having more a systematic prioritization of the budget requests. So that's going forward, and you'll have a report on that with the next meeting. And I just had one question, not related to the Strategic Directions Committee at all. I noticed as I went through the city's report, we had what I would consider a article on certain kind of political advocacy. This particular article, I'm in favor of what they're doing about it, but do we have any kind of standards or guidelines as to when we publish something in the online newsletter or even the printed newsletter in terms of use or not use of a political advocacy of a position, somebody's position or a group's position? Am I making myself clear?
Are you referring to, what kind of advocacy are you referring to?
Well, let me tell you the one that that struck me. The title to this is "Help Us Fight Betty DeVoe and the Trump Administration." What it says, I could support, but my point is, are we involved in using our publications for political advocacy by groups? And if so, do we have standards or guidelines as to how those get into the publication?
So generally, the general rule of thumb is that the city should not be involved in political advocacy.
That would be my
if there is a political issue that affects the city or its residents in a particular way, you can provide factual information regarding that issue. So let's say if there's a petition for some sort of thing, you can provide information regarding that petition if there's a direct effect on the residents, but it has to be a sort of a nonpartisan factual position. But I would say, as a general rule, absolutely not.
Not to have.
Correct.
So within our policy and rules and regulations, do we have any kind of written statement about that?
Well, there's Illinois statutes that govern how elected officials, city employees, and municipalities themselves can engage in political advocacy, and you should have been provided training. Employees should be provided training on that, and I'm not sure if there's policies that are written down, but I can certainly provide training on that issue, because it's a very common question that we get.
Well, and it's not the political advocacy necessarily of city employees or necessarily elected officials. That should be part of it, but also how things that appear to be as a political advocacy get into the publications? How within Prospect Heights is that evaluated?
I don't know, I can't speak to how, are you talking like a newsletter or something like that?
Well, yeah.
Or the
this-
website?
This was specifically in our electronic newsletter, which comes to, I don't know what percentage of the population.
I don't, Joe, do you know?
Oh, you're citing something specific that we've already.
Well, there's something was specific in the latest one that caught my eye, and I said to myself, well, as I said, I can support that position, but the question
Sure.
to me was, do we have any regulations or policies or whatever that govern that kind of placement in our publications?
We do now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I've had a policy, if you want to call it that if you are representing the city as an individual, I simply won't allow it. And there's a case in point where I terminated one of our people for actually saying things that were not policy with our city. Lately, we've had another article that was presented in the newsletter, and I rejected it for the same reason. An individual's opinion is well valued, but it can't come across as a city opinion or a city belief, and I think that's the only, only handcuff I've had on this thing. If there was one of these in the newsletter, then I missed it because I'm very, conscious of not taking a position that is not approved by the city.
Thank you, sir. Larry, does that answer your question?
I'd like to know, you can just supply me for purposes of information, if we have any rules or regulations about it, and what the state policy may be.
I can provide the state policy and then.
Joe,
when I
can you
work
look up if there's
actual
city policy?
City policies?
Yeah.
All right, Alderman Messer?
I have no report.
Mayor? You have any report?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to staff. We'll start with Deputy Chief Zalaki.
Nothing to report other than, just commenting on the Police and Fire Commissioner's report. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Duche?
Couple things. Just a quick update, probably a little more than a month ago, we took on the task of sending out some collection letters that hadn't been sent since probably spring to summer of 2016. 906 letters. We will never send out 906 letters again at one time, because for a period, I believe, of 2 weeks, that's the bulk of the time was spent dealing with those. Our intent was to attempt to get caught up so we could move those letters to a collection agency where a much more serious effort could be made to make sure those payments were made. Going forward, at the end of a calendar quarter, we will send out the collection letters for the previous quarter. I want you to know the only reason we sent them out was due to the backlog that was there. On the reconciliation front, it's a question I've been asked a number of times. There's 26 village bank accounts. Since we've come in, 25 of those 26 have been reconciled up through 8/31/2017. The major account, the village's main account, has only been reconciled, we're hoping, through the end of April, at the end of this week. It won't take us that long going forward. What has taken us time with that is probably half of the transactions we're looking at aren't posted in the general ledger. So as we've gone along and picked up things that are on bank statements, we've had to record them. We don't record them for 1 month, we've recorded them for every month in order to get us caught up. So I'm hopeful we'll be making some progress with that. Last thing, I know it's a priority of the council. We've been looking on online payment systems. Many of the systems that I think people have interest in, when we've made calls to some of the municipalities to see what they're running, the online payment systems they're running are tied to their software. So unfortunately, some of those systems we cannot utilize because we're not running that software. We've taken a look at an Express Pay, which we found out was associated with our software. Matter of fact, we met with them for probably over an hour today. There is the system that they have, I would have to say, has many benefits, more benefits than the current system we're running. Has a little higher cost than what we're used to paying, but I think the benefits of what we've seen today would kind of merit looking or taking on some additional cost. We will continue to go through that process. We'll bring it to back to the council as soon as possible. And if you have any questions, please, whether it be tonight or in the future, just give us a call.
A quick question. Is there anything, I think I asked this last time, just to make sure that you ask us before it's too late, but January 1st coming up, there's things like our 125 plan that we self-administer. I have no idea why. I don't know of anybody else that does that.
It's being taken care of.
That's being taken care of?
Alderman Levinson, I can answer that question only because I am the person who handles it internally. So I am pleased to say that we haven't signed any agreement yet. There will be agreement coming forward shortly with a vendor called FlexSource. They come highly recommended from our third-party administrator, our NSEBC, which handles our insurance. And their FlexSource is actually used by other municipalities in our co-op. So they come highly recommended. They are very cost-effective if you take away the fact that my time was being used to do something that I didn't feel comfortable with, especially with IRS regulations and HIPAA laws. This is what they do. They do it very well, and they do it to the letter of the law. So that is coming forward with it because I know you are interested in this. I'm very interested in this because I don't want to do this going into 2018 anymore.
There were a couple other things. I think you had made the suggestion, which I never thought of until you brought it up, as far as being a good idea. That being the use of credit cards to pay regular bills, so our warrant list will go down, so we're not paying gas, electric, telephone, buying parts for the vehicles.
The most difficult thing about a municipality, and Mike can attest to this because he's spent more time in finance than I ever have, or hope to by that as well, is we are kind of limited in when we print our checks. So when we are doing stuff like that, changing over like with your basic utilities that you pay on a monthly basis to a credit card or that, if Mike can ever come up with a more efficient system of that, I mean, I'm all in favor of that. I will defer any financial expertise to Mike sitting to my right.
I'll be more than willing to look at even a credit card policy. There's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of them that I've been used to working with. It's just right now I think there's some other things that are a little higher priority than getting that wrapped up at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
That's all I have.
All right. Assistant to the Administrator, Peter Falcone.
No report right now.
Director Peterson.
Just a real quick update on Plaza Drive. Today met with the representatives of PAPCOR, Country Pines Apartments, and city staff. We had a very productive meeting. Looking forward, we're going to be updating some prices to see if the prices changed and firming a few things up, and should hopefully have a firm agreement here shortly, or foundation of agreements.
Terrific.
That'll be all.
Administrator Wade.
No report, thank you.
All right. Moving on.
Which brings us to next item is old business. Item 11A, this is second reading of the staff memo and ordinance for a special use permit for a sit-down restaurant at 5 South Wolf Road, Ruben's Bar and Grill, and the petitioners here tonight, Mr. Ruben Avilas.
Mr. Avilas, would you step up? Thank you. How are you?
All right, how's everybody?
Good. Would you mind stating your name and address for the record?
My name's Ruben Aviles. Last name is Aviles, A-B, like in Victor, I-O-E-S.
Great.
I live at 1513 East Thayer Street, Mount Prospect, Illinois.
Great, thank you. One second. All right, is someone going to present?
Make a motion to approve.
But I entertain a motion to approve, to open discussions.
So moved.
All right, roll call, please.
No, discussion.
Discussion?
Okay.
No discussion?
So,
Discuss.
Alderman Ludwigson, you have any questions?
yes. At the last meeting, you had said that, actually not just at the last meeting, but at the ZBA hearing, you said that your intention was to get a liquor license, which you applied for, and that video gaming was something you had to have really to make this thing work. That it would be a different game, I think was the term you used, if, not game, you used the term to say if you didn't have the video gaming, that you would be rethinking this
No,
thing again.
I didn't say that.
You didn't?
No, I
I
said,
don't think you did.
when you asked me, why do I need liquor license?
Right.
So I said to you, I need a liquor license since I'm going to open up a restaurant. And now it's called Ruben's Bar and Grill to serve liquor.
Okay.
Because you asked me that last time.
Right, okay. Well, and I know I asked if you knew Stanko, I think you said.
And I said no.
Okay. So you never met him?
No, I met him, yes, when he had place. Me and my brother went to check out to see how it is and that.
Okay.
Yeah, but we haven't seen him since I took over, you know.
Okay, so you've taken over the space then?
Yeah, I've been paying rent for,
Who'd you take it over from?
I bought it from Mr.
Senko?
Senko, yeah.
Because he didn't own it before.
No, it was some other lady that we're talking. I don't get involved in that. All I know who I pay.
I guess I'll just tell you everybody knows my opinion.
Yeah.
That I see this as being, you have to have video gaming. Without video gaming, I think it's very difficult to operate based on the history of that location and the amount of business that goes there. So I understand what you're doing. You need the liquor license to get to video gaming.
Well, not only to get video game, but the restaurant to open up as a restaurant, you know.
Right.
See,
And
I want to rebuild the business. I want to bring in more revenue in, not just hot dogs and hamburgers and all that, because I'm Puerto Rican, so we like to do, you know, rice and beans and stuff like that. That's going to come more often now.
Right.
So on the menu.
And it's a very small store, not your store, but the strip mall there is pretty small, and right next to you is another.
Well, you got La Cantina, but that's right. That mostly is all tacos, more Mexican than you know what we're gonna do.
Right, and I know you have to apply for the variance because any restaurant requires a special use. So you're not asking for anything special other than you have to ask for a special use permit to open a restaurant. So that's the only reason that you're really before us. If you were selling, if you were a 7-Eleven,
no, that's
just open up, you wouldn't need to come before
Right.
us. So I'm not in favor of it because I know that ultimately, you know, it'd be a third location there that is a restaurant bar location, a very small restaurant. And I know the history, the last few people that were there involved Stanko. And there was a bad outcome of the last one, even though he wasn't the owner of it. So I'm not in favor of granting the special use because I would not be in favor of granting the liquor license. So I don't want to give a false sense of, hey, go ahead and open your restaurant if the liquor license is that important to you, that you would change your mind if you didn't get it.
No,
So
I understand.
I just wanted to state my position that
Because like I
go
said,
for that reason.
it's named Ruben's Bar and Grill, so you know, somebody comes in, sit down, have a eat and all that. How come you said Ruben's Bar and you don't have no liquor or nothing? So, you know.
I get it.
Alderman Dolan?
I mean, I invested, you know, a lot of money in this. This is not just, you know, I think this is my 5th time here. I've been going through 5 months with this. Planning with Mr. Peterson, things that he helped me, that he said, no, you need this to do it this way. And I comply with almost everything that, you know, the city did. My mailing, everything, you know.
I understand.
Like right now, I need to remodel, paint, do a second washroom because it's required 2 washrooms.
Alderman Doyle, any comments, questions?
Just a quick question. It's actually the same question that I asked the last time, and that is, if you were not granted the liquor license, would you continue plans with the restaurant portion only?
Yes, I could try it that way, but like he said, you know.
I understand your point. You
Yeah.
want to open it as a bar.
Right.
But that was
That
my
means I
question
will
last
have
time.
to
I
change.
just wanted to make sure
I
that I
would have to
understood.
change everything all over again, you know.
So you would continue
They
with
will
the
have to
plans
do a
of
new name and everything, you know, change it to just restaurant.
just restaurant, but you would continue with those plans if you were not granted?
Yes, because me and my brother is the one that's gonna run the,
Okay.
you know.
I have no other questions.
Alderman Rosenthal?
No questions.
Mayor?
I mean, I think I could bring good revenue to the place, you know, especially, like I said, if you notice, there's no Latino restaurants at all.
Alderman Messer?
I just have a comment based on Alderman Ludvigson's comment. I can walk to Players Pub, Rocky Vander's, and Union Ale House, and they're all basically the same type of restaurant bar, and they all still do well as far as their businesses, so I don't think
Right.
this one having, you know, businesses close by is necessarily going to impact it because it hasn't impacted others in the same situation. So I just wanted to throw that comment out there.
All right, Mr. Mayor? All right, I have no questions or comments. I'll ask for a roll call.
Alderman Ludvigson,
No?
Alderman Rosenthal,
Aye.
Alderman Dolick,
Aye.
Alderman Messer,
Aye.
President Pro Tem Williamson.
No. Motion passes 3-2. You're good.
Thank you.
Next item, 11B, this is second reading of ordinance for driveway variance at 697 Glendale Drive.
Good evening,
How you
Council.
doing, Joe?
How you doing?
Good.
My father, Joe.
Hey, would you guys mind stating your names and addresses for the record, please?
Joseph Pascucci, 697 Glendale Drive, Prospect Heights, Illinois.
Thanks.
Joseph D. Pascucci Jr., 4761 Wellington Drive, Long Grove.
Thanks.
Good evening, Council. I'm respectively requesting a continuation for the variation. We have submitted paperwork for the text amendment to Dan Peterson last week. We're asking for continuation.
I'd like to make a motion to table this issue for now.
By continuation, what is that why you're tabling?
Yeah, the table is a continuation, so they can go through the process of the text amendment.
So move.
Second.
All right, and voice vote for that, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. You're granted your continuance.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Mayor, we can hear you.
Mayor said he couldn't hear anything. So call him back.
Yeah. Oh, call him
Mayor
back.
wants to call him back.
Oh, I thought he wanted to call them.
Brief intermission.
No, no.
Oh,
No, he's calling somebody on the phone.
Cut off.
Hello, you've reached the Helmer household.
Well, next item, we can go to 12A, a resolution engineering services agreement with Galt Hamilton Engineering for 2017 drainage improvements. This provides for the site construction engineering services. The amount of the contract is $33,300.
Hi, this is Nick. Thank you for calling.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve it.
I'll second that motion.
All those
Any questions?
Roll call for this one.
Discussion, just real quick, I just want to make sure, we talked earlier about the GIS, anything that we do going forward for any project, to incorporate including that into our, I don't want to use the wrong term, our GIS system or model. Okay, thank you.
All right. Alderman Dolick?
Aye.
No, any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Alderman Rosenthal?
No questions.
Alderman Messer?
No, thank you.
All right, I have no questions either. I'd like to call for a roll call.
Alderman Ludwigson.
Aye.
Alderman Dolick.
Aye.
Alderman Rosenthal.
Aye.
Alderman Messer.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williamson.
Aye. All right, moving on.
Item 12B is staff memo and ordinance approving a text amendment to sections 5-2-2 definitions and 5-6-1A permitted uses in single-family residential district. Excuse me. I'll ask Director Peterson to briefly describe this.
To expand on this is the first reading and no action will be taken.
All right. Thank you, council. Tonight before us is Gene Schlosser from MGR Realty and Aurora Health Systems, or Healthcare. They currently own the house at 223 South Wolf Road. They've been the owner occupant since 2015. And they will, they've been operating a community integrated living arrangement at the home for that time under our current allowed occupancy limits of 4 residents. They have approached the city to request a text amendment to increase the occupant load of the house, number of occupants, to 8 individuals, which is what they were approved for under their community integrated living arrangement approvals from the state. To do that, we were required and looked at a change of our definition of family, the creation of a definition for a community family residence, and then to create the community family residence as a permitted use in the R1, of which testimony was given at last month's Plan Commission meeting. Testimony was deliberated, and the PZBA recommended unanimously to move forward with the text amendment. Tonight, Mr. Schloss, and please forgive me,
Irene Bruega.
Irene Perega are here to answer any questions. I can also answer any questions related to the text amendment and the special use.
Sorry, Alderman Rosenthal.
Who are the residents that you're housing there?
These are people who are born with developmental disabilities.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's people who are born with developmental disabilities.
Okay.
So it's a state-sponsored program for people who are over the age of 18, and they either no longer want to live with their families or can no longer be taking care of their families. And it is believed through many studies that instead of putting them in big facilities, it is better to put them in smaller home-like settings where they can live just like everybody else. They're taken care of 24 hours a day, and they get to live kind of like in a family setting, except they're being taken care of by special staff.
Who pays for this?
The
The state?
Yes.
Actually, 55 cents per dollar is federal money, 45 cents is state money. It's a double.
It's a Medicaid. Medicaid.
Medicaid?
No, it's a Medicaid waivers, but it's not direct Medicaid. It's a special waivers program, which is non-medical. That's why it's not direct Medicaid.
It's a state program as opposed
It's a
to federal?
state federal program, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Alderman Ludwigson?
Yeah, a few questions. You can educate me on SELA now. I've done a lot of reading about it. I know that our ordinance goes above and beyond just saying SELA. We kind of define what the people would be there for, or what reason they would have to be living in the group setting like that. Does SELA follow, are you familiar with how ours is worded now? Have you seen our ordinance? Have they seen that, Dan?
Yes.
Yes.
So is SELA very specific to the needs that these people have that you just explained? Or are there SELA, because SELA just stands for Community Integrated Living Arrangement,
Oh,
right?
but we're under the state, you know, I know what you're trying to say, but, I mean, we are really tightly regulated by the state.
But does the state
And
have a broader definition of what a SELA is compared to what our ordinance says?
So I think I can answer it. We use the same or language that the state statute has.
So there's not like a SELA A, B, C, D, E?
No,
Okay.
no. Our ordinance language, the proposed ordinance, mirrors the state statute in pretty much every way.
Okay. And then the other questions I'll have for Dan offline to this is just, you know, the house is, I think, a little over 1,500 or 1,600 square feet. And it's but we can go over that later. That has nothing to do with us passing this now.
There is a requirement under the SELA, and when this group came in 2015 and they did their home remodeling, they remodeled it to meet the requirements of the SELA for occupancy limits. So it's been permitted, remodeled, and reviewed to the current standard, which falls within those guidelines.
But I guess I'll ask the question now. Is our standard different than what Arlington Heights or Mount Prospect would be? Because 8 people in 1,600 square feet gives you a 200 square foot per occupant load, which is pretty tight.
Our current and the same property maintenance code and occupancy code that's used by those other towns is the International Property Maintenance Code that basically requires 50 square feet per person in a bedroom, and that's your main driver. Under the SELA, they actually are required to have 55 square feet per person, so under the SELA, they actually have 10 extra square feet to share with the 2 people. The common area elements are above what the minimums are under the property maintenance code, and that's common throughout, and that's what they're even more, they require more square footage than even our current standard is for our regular apartments now.
And now I understand your part. I've read a lot about what you guys do or what SELAs are. But, and I know we've already talked about this, Dan, but we're changing not just the code to say that SELAs are allowed because they have to be by state law or by whatever reason that they have to be. But now we're also changing the definition of family and how many unrelated people can live in a space. My question is, we're going to 4. Does that mean that those people then have their own, when 4 people move in outside of a SELA, unrelated people as our definition goes, does each one of those people then have the right to carry another group with them into it? Does that make sense?
Basically, if I understand your question, if you have a house, you have 4 individuals, and then individual A decides to bring a girlfriend and 2 kids, does that count against? That would violate the ordinance because they're unrelated at that point in time. Now you've exceeded the limit.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Dolick?
My only question is what staff or how many staff would be there? Is it 24/7? Is it a single staff person? And I don't need like specific qualifications, but are they certified in some way or another?
Yes, all staff is certified. They all go through a background check by the government. I mean, you know, this is not anybody can just come and do this job. For 4 people, it's 1 person. They're do 8-hour shifts, so it's going to be 3 people for a 24-hour period. Once we go over 4, it right away goes to 2 people. In addition, there may be other people who come in to help as well, such as nursing staff if needed, psychiatrists, things like that.
Okay, I'm
But
just
the
trying to get an
24/7
idea of how many people are going in and out in addition to any residents.
Full-time, if it's 4 people, 1. Any more than 2, it's 2.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Alderman Rosenthal?
No questions.
Alderman Messer?
I don't know if Dan can answer this. It said that the PZBA heard testimony from adjoining residential neighbors. I was wondering if we knew if there was any opposition from any of the neighbors?
There was discussion amongst the neighbors, and it was mainly that they were unaware that they were there to begin with. And they were concerned about if their quality of life would be disrupted by actions of the occupants, in which it was stated none of them in the year and a half that they've been there residing already even have had an incident or even knew they existed. And there's been minimal, I think, one call for police and ambulance backup for one tenant in a year and a half. And that's less than what what some of single-family residences have. So I think once they heard the testimony presided and the questions, it was more of an educational process than it was outright against that in their neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, if they didn't even know you were there, they obviously didn't have any problems, so. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, my question is for Director Peterson. You know, this all sounds great on the surface. I guess the question is not your use, but future uses. What's to prevent anyone from taking advantage of this text amendment?
The text amendment is written very tightly that it has to be to get qualified under the community family residence section, has to be a state licensed CELA, community integrated living arrangement. Also, too, we put in there provisions to limit the distance from already existing, so you can't have multiple facilities within a neighborhood, so you don't get one neighborhood or another with multiple CELAs. Also, the text is written that it does not, for drug rehabs, transition houses, criminal, jail to society. This is a very tightly written CELA for this type of population under the state act.
Okay, thank you. Again, this was for first reading. This is, no action will be taken here tonight, but will be taken at a future meeting. I don't know if there's a date in mind for that already or not.
I think we're looking at the 9th.
Okay, so we'll bring this back up on October the 9th. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 12C.
This is an ordinance establishing a vacant foreclosed property registration program. This is a first reading, and Director Peterson, do you want to describe this?
Sorry, I forgot.
Yes. The issue of vacant and foreclosed properties has been around for about a decade now. There's a significant cost to municipalities for these types of properties, and the city has not had an overwhelming abundance of them. However, the ones that we've had, we've run into some issues trying to pin down who the rightful parties are to get service, get the lawns mowed, get repairs done, get trees cleaned up, monitor what's going on. Also, too, these types of programs, which have been around for a long time, are very labor intensive to staff. Over the course of the last 9 months, I've been researching this and found a company called Property Registration Champions, LLC. They are basically the only company that I've found and researched that provides that service of monitoring and tracking and registering the foreclosed and vacant properties so that we keep current with who's handling the properties. And that's the biggest issue for us is who do we send lien notices to? Who do we send abatement notices if we have some? If it changes from one bank to a different mortgage processor in a transaction, we end up starting over, or we have to go out and mow the lawns and then figure out who to lien. So the beauty of this program, in my opinion, is this is one where we set up the ordinance, we have an agreement, we charge a fee, which we're proposing to be $200 per property every 6 years, which is charged to the mortgage servicer, and then the company keeps 100 of that, we get 100. So they get paid for their services out of the registration fee, and then we get money that helps administer the program internally. So right now, the city has 65 active, full-blown foreclosure cases in the city. There's another 200 and I believe 200 and roughly 201 that have recently had transactions, which just means they've changed hands. We don't know if they're still in a state of foreclosure, if they've been sold for rehab, if they've been bought for occupancy. They could be just transferred to a different mortgage service provider. And based on my research and the reports of property registration champions, that could be an additional 40% are still vacant or foreclosed, which could be another 80 homes that are in some point of foreclosure. And it just gives us an added tool to streamline our property maintenance and enforcement and tracking. And then too, it helps us if we catch people doing work without permits, new residence and vehicle stickers, other tools that we could use to benefit our enforcement and the city, improve the quality of life of those properties. What I'm proposing is adopting the ordinance as written and then recommending that we enter into a 2-year service agreement with property registration champions with renewals, on an annual basis after the initial 2 years. And I could answer any questions.
Okay, Alderman Ludwigson.
Yes, a few questions. I read through their description of what they do in that. It didn't seem, or our ordinance, it didn't seem like there's any provision, and maybe I missed it because it was a long ordinance or a long change to our property maintenance code. Is there any provision that says if you don't register with us, that you have a problem and that you're gonna get, it's worse for you not to register? Because I see where we require them to register, but it's kind of like vehicle stickers. If you choose not to, do you just fly under the radar until you're caught?
The hard part about this is knowing that if they're even foreclosed or not. That's the problem we have currently. And if we do get them and they do not register, I believe it is in here under the enforcements.
Well, it's up to $500 a day.
That's our penalty clause. And that would be like issuing a citation to the service provider for not registering.
So we're gonna get a list of these things before they would even know to register with us, so we'll know who owns it or who's.
Correct. What property champions will do once we enter into the contract with them is they will do the active construction of that database based on all their banking records, the mortgage servicing records, the filed foreclosure records, and provide us with an active list on a date certain. And then they will mail the notices to those people for the registrations, and we'll track that.
There was something in there too that's talked about whether the bank goes and gets a certificate saying whether there's an occupant or not, whether the space is occupied. That seemed to come up a lot in the ordinance where it talked about whether it's occupied. Is a bank required to send notice to the county when something is no longer occupied by the previous?
The only notification that they're required to give is when it first initially goes into the foreclosure process, and that could be months before it either goes vacant or transfers or totally foreclosed. And so that's what their clause is, to make sure that we can send the notices to the bank even if there's an occupant in it and notified on them. Because what we've seen is a lot of those properties, once they're in foreclosure, get the foreclosure and then ultimately vacancy. And what we're trying to do is circumvent it and get in front of it before we're behind it.
Thank you.
Alderman Dolick.
No question.
Alderman Rosenthal.
Just to clarify, so the initiation or the trigger for this company does it. It's not something that we or you supply them with.
Correct. In the last 10 years that I've been monitoring the vacant foreclosed property, when I do the assessment and evaluation of it, I can't justify the staff time to do the title searches, the mortgage searches, the court filings to even know what's out there. And this is what this company will do at a minimum cost, and it's actually a cost-positive program for the city to manage the program.
Alderman Messer?
I have no questions.
All right, one question of mine, it is $200 per property that is vacant or foreclosed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and they're not making any arrangements, they're just doing the searches? So we need to still make arrangements for any landscaping or any liens to be filed?
And that's where the $100 fee, we get 100, they get 100, and that 100 offsets our administrative of the program.
Okay. Mayor Helmer, you have any questions or comments?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's first reading, no action to be taken on 12C. Moving on to 12D.
This is part of that. This would be the resolution and agreement with property registrations to manage the program.
Okay, motion to approve to open discussions.
So move.
Second.
Okay, anybody have any further questions on that matter?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Did Kevin, did you, it looks like this agreement was written by them. Did you review it?
I did. We engaged in a couple rounds of negotiation. They had some language in there that we didn't like. So they've been actually very amenable to all the changes we've requested.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Alderman Ludwigson?
Aye.
Alderman Dolick?
Aye.
Alderman Rosenthal?
Aye.
Alderman Messer?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving on to item 13.
Item 13 is the listing of items for our next workshop meeting. It's October 9th, and we have commercial truck parking, city liquor code, Chicago Executive Airport Agreement, and Plaza Drive discussion.
Let me ask, 13D, discussion of Plaza Drive. I think we're far enough along now that it's more of an update, isn't it?
That's what I would do. Would you, we'll come back with whatever tentative agreement to the council when we get it ironed out.
So at this point, does it need to be a discussion topic anymore?
I don't think so.
It might be worth keeping a status report, at least a status report, because we will be coming back to the council with
turning it over
requests from the ownership.
Okay.
Did we, at the last meeting, we talked about doing a joint agreement or resolution where they would both sign something saying, hey, we know this has to be fixed, we each agree to pay for half of the construction cost, less whatever we talked about. Is that where we're moving forward? Has either one of them signed that and sent it back?
I think that's what he said they've been negotiating the terms on.
Today's meeting was a step in that direction. However, one of the issues that came up was the original quotes go all the way back to April. So they want to get new numbers. The original quotes were prepared by Country Pines. PABCOR would like to go out and get their own to see if they can get a better price, then come back and iron out those agreement sides.
We will also, there's new numbers, but also discussed today, PABCOR also requested that it be a third. The city's share of the project be a third too. So by keeping this on the agenda, we'd be able to come back to you with a more up-to-date report.
A third in addition to soft costs, or no?
A third of the project.
So the project including
Including
work
construction.
and the soft costs
Right.
rolled into one.
And there was discussion about that too. There's concern about application of prevailing wages too. So there's more for us to come back to council with that was different from the last meeting, so.
Okay. Sure. Yes.
I was involved with the discussion this morning, and I thought it was very productive. I think all three sides now realize that Plaza Drive needs to be redone, it needs to be resurfaced, it needs to be realigned. They had two concerns basically, and that was that they may want to make sure that we wouldn't eliminate Plaza Drive once we take title to it. And I said, look, the fire department isn't going to, be excited about not having egress from that portion of frontage road. And I said, I don't feel that it'd be a problem, but it's something we'll look into. So Dan is going to talk to the fire department, and we'll see if we can get an agreement there. They want that little road, and so does, of course, the other people from the condos, and so do we for access to any problems we might encounter over there. It was a good discussion. We were all on the same side at the very end. The total dollars we talked about was about $150,000 for everything. At this point, they're all willing to come on board for the 50%, the $50,000 each.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just one more thing, Dan had said that they were going out getting prices, not as if neither one of them is going to run that project, correct? That still has to be a city project.
That's up to discussion.
Is it though?
Well, one of the items that we were discussing is, under Engineer Berez's report from 2014, if this is a city project, then we have to go out to competitive bid, we have to do prevailing wage. There's a lot of other items that are involved with this road construction project. If the private parties manage the construction of it, then and we are not party to the construction cost, and we handle the transfer side, the soft, does that, constitute, they can get a better price under the prevailing wage. So we have to, some more research has to be done on that. If we want to manage it and we want to do it, there's going to be some potential significant cost increases.
Well, where he left it, I thought, Dan, was that the ability for PAMCOR to do the project, the ability for us to supervise the project, and then have reimbursements from the parties involved for the cost of what would have been just an outright check written.
We would oversee it as a normal permitted project. We would do the engineering inspections, we would do the city inspections, we'd make sure it met all the city requirements for a public road. So when, at the end of the day, when it is dedicated to the city, it does meet all our standards, and we can expect that 15 to 20 year lifespan of the road when it's done.
Well, I think we will be a major assistance in who does what. In other words, the contractors and how the documents are written and what we want to watch out for. And they agreed to that. I didn't see any big, hands up type thing. And I think that's the way to do it. Eliminate some of our problems, eliminate some of our costs, and I think we'll get the same thing done whether we do it hands-on or they do it hands-on and we supervise them.
Question?
This is the same people that aren't maintaining it now. So, my concern is, I do think it's something that, we need to be involved with. I get it, it's their road now, they can fix it and we can agree to take it over, improved or unimproved, either way. But, I don't know, I just leery of letting something like that go and us not actually be the people doing it.
Well, maybe while they're getting bids, that's something Kevin can look into for us, if they do it, if there's a way for us to somehow have a side letter agreement or something that we have to approve everything and oversee it on some level. And then once we have more information, we can talk about it more.
Yeah, the question will be, at what point does prevailing wage kick in?
Yeah.
Plus,
So that's when we look to you.
If you have multiple levels of people looking at this, you're just adding cost to it versus the city doing it right from the get-go.
All right, the finance director has some comments.
Kevin, wouldn't we be subject to prevailing wage by contributing a third to the project?
Yeah, we would. If we were doing the 50,000, is that what the suggestion was? We would be. And now, if it's just permitting and supervision and review of engineering, that would not trigger it. But if we're contributing any money,
If those other costs, though, exceeded the 50,000, wouldn't we also be subject to prevailing wage?
I'm not sure.
I think we need to check.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to look at the various options for the city in terms of financing and determine when prevailing wage would be triggered.
We
But if
also
you're-
need to see if the council agrees to pay a third, because that's news to us.
Well, yeah, I'm curious,
It keeps going up and up, so
What
I'm
are-
not sure if that's even something we would consider.
I guess I'm curious what our obligation is outside of, doing it out of good faith and trying to facilitate the transaction, but at the end of it, we're taking dedication of it anyway and assuming any future responsibility for this road, and I think that's a huge cost. And they never have to worry about it again. So why are we really considering putting any money towards this? I mean, I can understand softening some of the cost for permits and therefore, but not much more.
Yeah, I don't know where the third came from, but that's a little.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to know if they are fixing the potholes that are there now. Are they actually doing, is this whole thing just in limbo, or are they still filling with? Actually,
They
last thing I
haven't been
checked,
doing anything. I drive there a couple times. They had filled it with like gravel,
I think the city.
but it goes away very quickly. So yes, I don't, and if that's our public works department doing it, then they don't do anything. I mean, they haven't in the 13 years that I've lived there, so.
Nick, do you know if they're doing anything?
Oh, well, I can answer that question. I believe we've been filling some potholes now and then.
Our Public Works Department has temporarily put some gravel in at the request of the fire department because of the lack of maintenance on a couple. The owners of the Country Pines have done some cold patch. They've done some mix of some concrete, which is the two different materials have actually contributed to the deterioration faster. We've been trying to get this done without having to go to the legal action, which is ultimately, we always have that ability to do that. However, we thought moving forward to try and come to an agreed-upon solution was better than a court-ordered or a mandatory fix, which is always our prerogative.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
We'll bring that back on the 9th. Next item is 14th, approval of warrants. We have a warrant request, total warrant of $323,624.05.
I move to approve the warrants.
Second the motion.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Ludwigson?
Aye.
Alderman Dolick?
Aye.
Alderman Rosenthal?
Aye.
Alderman Messer? President sorry, Mayor
To Scott.
Scott, just Scott.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Item 15, resident comments, non-agenda matters, and we have nothing filed. 16, executive session.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining matters and pending litigation.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, no action will be taken coming out of this meeting, so should we adjourn the open session meeting?